130 years ago, trade unionists had the vision to take their struggle for decent working conditions from the shearing sheds and the factory floor to the floor of our parliaments. For 13 decades, Labor's historic mission has been to fight for fairness, to imagine a better future for Australia and then set about creating it. Through good and bad times, it has been Labor governments that have advanced reforms in the interests of working people, in partnership with the industrial wing of our great movement. This special conference is a chance for us to demonstrate our unity of purpose once more. It comes at a moment of reckoning for our country. Over the last 2 weeks, what we used to call once-in-a-century floods have drowned much of our east coast. They come in the wake of an unprecedented fire season that scorched so much of our continent. And in the nation's capital and beyond, women are making a brave stand against a toxic culture that has held them back and endangered them for so long. What these challenges have in common is a government that's in denial about how quickly our world is changing, in denial about the science of climate change, in denial about women's truth. But this government's failings haven't just materialised in the past couple of months. We should never forget that under them, we entered the pandemic from a position of economic weakness, slow growth, flat wages, declining productivity, business investment going backwards, debt which had already doubled, a government that is a reflection of Scott Morrison's character, a man of short-term politics, not long-term vision, an angry man who has mastered the rare art of clenching a glass jaw, a man who doesn't hold a hose, won't hold an inquiry and never, ever accepts responsibility. A man with an ear of tin, a heart of stone and a wall of concrete shielding him from the concerns of his fellow Australians. We got an insight into his character when he used the pandemic as a smokescreen to try and ram through legislation that would have struck at the heart of the rights and conditions of working Australians. Chief amongst them would have been the heroes of the pandemic. We heard from one just before with Judy. Nurses, cleaners, aged care workers, childcare workers, shop assistants, truckies, public servants and emergency service workers. In short, the very people who kept the nation moving. He sought not to reward them, but to punish them. And the punishment doesn't end there. On Sunday, he ripped away JobKeeper, the only support that was keeping the economic roof from crashing down on so many small business owners and their employees. Meanwhile, the government has stood back as large profitable companies milked JobKeeper to pay dividends to their shareholders and huge bonuses to their executives. We're talking in the realm of $10 billion here. Compare that to Robodebt and the malice with which they monstered pensioners and Centrelink clients. That is the Liberals in a nutshell. Strong against the weak, but weak against the strong. Then there are the promises they never kept. They said there would be 4 million vaccinations by the end of tomorrow, but they're currently 3.4 million short. And now we're seeing the consequences of this failure to deliver on their promise playing out in real time. They said that JobMaker would assist 450,000 Australians into work. As of last week, guess how many it's delivered? 609, not 450,000. They have given Australia $1 trillion in debt, but little to show for it in terms of legacy. Not a single major economic or social reform. Not a single major new infrastructure project. Nothing on improving our schools, our TAFEs or our hospitals. Nothing to close the gap between First Nations people and non-Indigenous Australia. Nothing to make our economy and society more resilient, able to withstand the next national emergency. During this period, though, they've managed to splurge $1 billion of taxpayers' money on self-promotion and advertising. Scott Morrison leads a government that is out of ideas, it's out of touch, and at the next election, they should be out of office. A government of smirk and mirrors that is not worthy of re-election. But I and Australian Labor take nothing for granted. Tonight I want to talk to you about the values that I would bring to the Prime Ministership, shaped by where I have come from and the vision that Labor offers you and your family. I proudly came from council housing. My values and my politics came from my single mum, who battled hard to bring me up on an invalid pension. I understand what it is to overcome adversity because Mum led by example every day as I was growing up. Without her, I'd be nothing. Like the women stepping forward to seek justice, she was a fighter for others. And she'd agree with me that a world in which women have equality will produce a better world for men too. She was a happy woman even though she had bad health and little in the way of money. She knew the fulfilment that comes from helping others who had even less than she had. She taught me to help people and to serve the community. It's how she lived her life. I saw how much good that government policies and programs did to make our lives better. Medicare, public housing, the invalid pension. Change in society happens when we work cooperatively with others to get things done. And that's why I've always tried to be a builder. I always ask, how can I make positive change happen? And that's why the posts I've held in government have been about doing things, real things. Infrastructure, transport, communications, regional development, local government. Building roads and rail lines, fibre NBN, improving our airports, creating public facilities right across the country. Things get done when you bring people together. And that's what I want to do. I want to work with unions and the business community. Without successful businesses, you don't create jobs. A Labor government will always prioritise the creation of good, secure jobs. And that comes through mutual respect and working towards our common interests. That is why I refused to play politics and was constructive when the pandemic was at its height. I know there's some people who were critical of this, but that's just who I am. What Labor under my leadership offers is sound, considered, honest government. A government that faces up to reality, that listens to what people are saying, that accepts expert advice, that has genuine empathy for people's concerns, one that backs the aspirations which all Australian families have for a better life, not just for themselves, but for their kids, grandkids, for their neighbours, for their community and for the country. One that restores confidence in government with a real National Integrity Commission. A government that recognises that out of this once-in-a-century crisis, we have a once-in-a-century chance to rebuild and renew our country, to build back stronger. Here's what I pledge on behalf of Labor. Labor will give working Australians a better deal. Not just any job, but a secure job. Job security, better pay, a fairer system. We'll put job security explicitly into the Fair Work Act. We'll give rights to gig economy workers through the Fair Work Commission. We'll consult on portable entitlements for workers in insecure industries. We'll make sure that casual work is properly defined in law. We'll crack down on cowboy labour hire firms to guarantee a pretty simple principle: same job, same pay. We'll put a cap on back-to-back short-term contracts for the same role. We'll promote and ensure more secure public sector jobs. And government contracts will be given to companies and organisations that offer secure work for their employees. We'll expose and close the gender pay gap. It's more than 13%, and give women fleeing family violence 10 days paid leave. Labor will ensure the women and men who work in our care industries, mental health, the NDIS and aged care, get the right, respect and working conditions they deserve to do their vital jobs. Labor will make childcare cheaper for 97% of families in the system, removing the financial barriers that discourage women from working more hours and pursuing their careers. The next step towards our goal of affordable universal childcare. Labor will deliver a future made in Australia, a future where we make things and stand on our own 2 feet. We will use the purchasing power of government to buy Australian products and services, supporting Australian jobs and skills. We'll create a national rail manufacturing plan to build more trains here. We will maximise local content in the $270 billion investment pipeline of defence projects. And today, I proudly announced that a Labor government will establish the National Reconstruction Fund. Working in partnership with the private sector, including the superannuation industry, the fund will revive our ability to make world-class products. It will commercialise innovation and technology. It will diversify our industrial base and develop our sovereign capability. And in the process, it will drive regional economic development and create secure, well-paid jobs. We will play to our national strengths and back industries of strategic importance: mining and resources, agriculture, forestry and fishing, medical science, renewables and low-emission technologies, defence industries, transportation. This represents nothing less than the largest transformational support for manufacturing in our history. Labor will proudly invest in Australia and in Australian workers. And to power this manufacturing revolution, Labor will rebuild and modernise our energy grid using Australian expertise, Australian steel and Australian workers to deliver cheap, reliable and clean energy. Good for industry, good for households, good for our environment. We will take advantage of our abundant reserves of lithium, nickel, copper and other rare earths the world needs to make electric vehicles, batteries and low-emission technologies. We will take advantage of the extraordinary potential of hydrogen technology. My ambition for Australia is to be a renewable energy superpower, and we are committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Tomorrow I will have more to say about Labor's plan to help families and communities play their part in achieving this critical goal. A plan that will make electric cars more affordable and support the rollout of community batteries nationwide. Labor has also heard the generous statement from Uluru, and we will work to build public support for finally recognising First Nations people in our Constitution. We're diminished as a nation while that doesn't occur, and will give First Nations people a voice to Parliament. Labor has also heard the women of Australia loudly and clearly. While we must do better on childcare, on workplace rights, on closing the pay gap, on women's safety and on representation within our parliaments, we need a seismic cultural shift. You can't seize a moment if you don't understand it in the first place. And quite frankly, a Prime Minister who keeps Andrew Laming in his party room but removes Christine Holgate from her public service position just doesn't get it. I want to be a Prime Minister for every Australian. I have asked the Shadow Minister for Women, Tanya Plibersek, and the leaders of our Status of Women Caucus Committee, Sharon Clayton and Annika Wells, to lead the process of further developing our comprehensive women's policy to take to the next election. It will be a policy that delivers on the two most important aims: women's economic security and independence, and safety. These aims are indivisible. Labor has always led on gender equality. I was a delegate to this conference in 1984 when we adopted the affirmative action policy that has made us a stronger party and movement. Friends, the choice we will face at the next election is becoming clearer by the day. A tired government that has been in power for 8 long years, that's unravelling before our eyes, led by a man who is an empathy vacuum and an accountability black hole. Or a Labor government that will be on your side. No community forgotten, no worker left behind. With the right policies and the right leadership, I truly believe our country can make this moment our own. An Australia that's inclusive, an Australia that's strong, an Australia that looks to the future with confidence, and that is what we will deliver. Labor is on your side.